So I guess I'm making this a habit. It's another week, and it's time for another 2015 NFL mock draft. Now, a couple of things to note. First and foremost is that this particular mock draft is a two-round edition. I believe I swore and said I wouldn't do a two-round edition. So, of course, I come right back the next week, and I've decided to do a two-round edition of the 2015 NFL mock draft. So there you go. That is all, of course, down below in the description box. Couple of other things that I need to touch on. Number one, the draft order is based off of the standings after week number 6. So if your team is picking in a certain spot, that is because that's where they would be picking at this point in time. Also, don't read too much into it where it's like, you see the last two teams are Philadelphia and San Diego. That's not me saying that those two teams are making the Super Bowl, okay? Let's get that straight. Now, in terms of the philosophy for this particular mock draft, for the two-round version, it's a combination of some teams taking best player available, some teams drafting for need, some teams drafting for a certain philosophy, like you have a new coaching staff, or you just took a rookie quarterback in the 2014 draft, you need to surround him with help. So that's part of it. Now, with the order playing out as it is, it was kind of a screwy mock draft to me to do because there are certain players in certain spots I'm just like, this doesn't really work for me and doesn't really make sense at this point in time. So again, as is so often the case, like I said, this is, if anything else, to give you some guidance in terms of how I personally am seeing things at this point in time. And mind you, we're still only in mid-October. There's another 6.5 months of work for me to do. A lot of players for me to watch more, a lot of players for me to watch more in depth. So this is just a very early part of the process. Now, I'm also trying to project some players that will rise through the draft process, some players that could potentially fall through the draft process, because at this point in time, if you think, where all 32 teams are going to draft in the first round, or what players are going to go there, you're kidding yourself. You don't. And, so when people comment, how the fuck do you not have this guy here? Or why do you not have this guy here? It's not even so much necessarily a personal belief of mine. It's a matter of trying to project how the draft could play out based off of this particular scenario I'm using, how certain guys will rise and fall throughout the draft process. We see it all the time. So many fans just can't get it through their thick skulls that this is how it works. I don't get it, whatever. But looking at some of the picks of note here, first what'll stand out, I'm sure, is that I've got Andrus Peat going number 1 to Jacksonville. Now, I wouldn't have much of a gripe if they sat there and took Todd Gurley, because I do think Todd Gurley is a special talent. And, obviously he would be a big-time boost to Blake Bortles in that Jacksonville Jaguars offense. A lot of people talk about defense and everything else. No, you just took a young quarterback with a 3rd overall pick. He is now your franchise player. Fucking build around him. Not your damn defense. So many fans, draft experts, organizations don't get this. See the Jets for a perfect example. And then we get to number 2. And a lot of people will say on the heels of his performance Sunday against the San Diego Chargers that why would the Raiders sit there and take Derek Carr and skip and whoop-de-woo? So I will explain this again. Derek Carr was taken by Reggie McKenzie, a general manager who most likely will not have a job in 2015, nor does he deserve to have one. So you will have both a new coach and probably a new general manager in the fold. Regardless if the owner really likes Derek Carr or not and believes he could be the guy, do you want to be the general manager and coach that ties yourself to a quarterback that was picked in the 2nd round by a previous failed regime? Furthermore, if you're picking number 2 overall, that means that Derek Carr really didn't prove that he was a big-time guy. Also, furthermore, he's a 2nd-round pick. He wasn't a 1st-round pick, so the investment is entirely different. And if you feel that Marcus Mariota is a special type of talent, then you have to take him, because I don't view Derek Carr as a special type of quarterback. It's that simple. In terms of other things, a lot of people will mock a quarterback to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wherever they pick. And yeah, you can make an argument for that, but I could make an equally strong, if not stronger, argument that the quickest avenue to success for the Buccaneers under Lovie Smith and the easiest way for them to get better and get better in a hurry is giving him more help on the defensive side of the ball. That's going to be the identity of that organization. That's where that team needs to dominate, not the offensive side of the ball. It's actually why I wasn't as huge of a fan of their 2014 draft as maybe some people were. Yes, they got a lot of pieces on offense, and that's all fine and good, but you brought in a defensive-minded head coach. If you're not going to take a quarterback in the first round, then you need to draft defense early and often. You brought that defensive coach in for a reason. Get that unit to dominate as much as possible. And in the case of Leonard Williams, I think he's a talented player. I think he could be perhaps a bit overrated, but I need to, again, watch him more in depth and watch more games of him throughout 2014 before I fully come to that determination. But I view him as a type of guy that could either play end or tackle in Lovie Smith's scheme. You'll see Spencer Drango has shot up my draft board this time. You know, you might sit there and say, why would Washington take an offensive tackle? Look, Jay Gruden likes those big type of mauling offensive linemen, and he doesn't really have a lot of that with his current starters. And, you know, you look at Drango, he's a bigger dude. You might say, well, that's way too early to take a right tackle, perhaps. But again, he was a part of the Bengals. You know, the Bengals once took Andre Smith 6th overall, and they don't really regret it. I don't think the Chargers regret taking DJ Fluker 11th overall. Sometimes if the guy can just flat out play and be a big-time player and validate his first-round pick, you screw all the freaking logic that is prevalent or all the preconceived notions. You just don't care. Some other guys that I see shooting up the draft board as time goes along. I've talked about Leonard Floyd from Georgia before. I think he's a guy that could do it, potentially. I look at a guy like Shawn Oakman. It wouldn't surprise me to see him end up being not only a top 10 pick, but perhaps a top 5 pick. I think Eddie Goldman from Florida State could be another guy that really shoots up some boards. Shaq Thompson, the outside linebacker from Washington, who I have going to Chicago at 16. He's that type of guy in that Shazier mold that a lot of teams think is what they really need, even though I vision Shaq Thompson more as a weak side linebacker in the NFL as opposed to an inside linebacker. Guys that I think could potentially drop as the process goes along. I do think Gurley could drop a little bit, and not because of the crap going on with the autographs and this and that. It's because he's a running back. And based off of the recent history of running backs, they drop at draft time. I'm not convinced or fully sold that Todd Gurley will be a top 10 pick in the 2015 NFL draft, whether he deserves to be or not. I'm just not sold on it. Another guy that I think could really drop as the process goes along might be somebody like a Cedric Ogbehe, the offensive tackle from Texas A&M. Here is a guy that I do think is overrated. I'm not sure that he is an NFL left tackle. Furthermore, I just think there are flat-out better offensive linemen in this draft class, namely guys like Peat and Drango, and Brandon Scherff from Iowa. I think you could see as the process goes along, there could be a good chance that the kid from Texas A&M could drop down some draft boards. And then, of course, it'll be notable that you will see Jameis Winston all the way at number 28. That's not necessarily where his talents justify him going, and that's not me necessarily saying that he would for sure go that low in round 1, because somebody at some point might want to roll the dice and take a gamble. But if we sit there and think that based off of the recent culture of the NFL and the recent environment of the NFL, that all of the stupid things that Jameis Winston has been involved with, both petty and stupid, or petty theft and not so petty rape charges and et cetera, there are going to be teams that are very scared of Jameis Winston. They're going to be very concerned about Jameis Winston. There are going to be some teams that completely remove him off their draft boards entirely due to off-the-field concerns. And with the limited number of teams picking in the first round that would be willing to take a quarterback first, that could create a scenario where Jameis Winston could drop quite a bit. And I mean quite a bit. I wouldn't say completely out of round 1, but would it be out of the realm of possibility for him to drop into the last few picks of round number 1? No, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all. At this point, I would actually say it's likely, unless somebody really, really wanted to gamble on the guy. But those are some of the guys that I look at that could drop and could rise as the process goes along. Like I said, I've got my first 2-round mock draft for 2015 down in the description box. You're welcome to give me your feedback. You can ask me questions about it, what have you. But as I said, keep in mind it's still very early in the process, and I guarantee you 2 months from now, my mock drafts will look a lot different than what they do right now.